this would be welcome. Merci. Toda. Can I introduce you? My colleague will say a few opening remarks. Martin Loken, please come to the podium. Martin is part of our executive staff here. He is in charge of a group responsible for foreign and defense policy, energy and environment, immigration. Martin, je vous laisse la parole. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Merci, Denis. Mesdames, Messieurs, bienvenue à l'ambassade du Canada. Welcome to the Embassy of Canada. As Denis said, my name is Martin Loken. I'm Minister for Political Affairs here. At the outset, I want to give a big thank you to the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum for partnering on this important event. We are especially grateful for the help of Amy Segal, the museum's Director, Strategic Initiatives and Programming. Thank you, Amy. And welcome to Barry Avrich, Director of the film Prosecuting Evil, The Extraordinary Life of Ben Ferencz, which we're screening this evening. And I'd also like to welcome Naomi Kiekeler, Director of the Simon Schott Center for the Prevention of Genocide. Thank you both for joining us. We look forward to hearing your remarks after the screening this evening. We all share the responsibility to remember the Holocaust and to draw lessons from this horrific chapter in human history. Last week, Canada's Governor-General was in Jerusalem for the 5th World Holocaust Forum, and she's now in Poland to mark the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau, the largest Nazi concentration and extermination camp. 1.1 million people were murdered at the camp. 6 million Jewish men, women, and children were murdered in the Holocaust. 6 million people. The number is staggering, but numbers alone do not paint the entire picture of that horrific moment in human history. Who were those people? Their lives forever stolen. They were mothers and fathers, torn apart, torn from their children. They were sons who did not get to become fathers, daughters who did not get to become mothers. They were children. They were babies. Their smiles and tears, joys and fears, destroyed forever. And we remember the survivors, 40,000 of whom resettled across Canada after the Second World War. They escaped with their lives, but carried forever the horrors of the Holocaust. They carried forever memories of lost loved ones. Some survivors are here with us this evening. Welcome. We are humbled in your presence. Many survivors carried memories of hiding throughout the war. Little children, like the 2-year-old girl you see in this photograph, hid with their families. She and her family were hiding in an attic in Amsterdam when the 1st Canadian Army liberated Holland in May 1945. She is here this evening with us, Louise Lawrence-Israëls. Thank you for joining us. And thank you. We thank you, Louise, for your resilience and strength in sharing your story with us this evening. We listen to survivors, the primary witnesses of the atrocities of the Nazi regime. We listen to remember this horrific chapter in human history. Last week, we, alongside our partners in the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, reaffirmed our commitment to the declaration of the Stockholm International Forum on the Holocaust. 75 years later, we remember, because our world is still not immune to the scourge of hatred and indifference. As Jewish communities continue to face unacceptable acts of anti-Semitism, we stand with them. We stand with the victims and survivors of the Holocaust and vow never again. Again, thank you to all of you this evening for joining us for this very important evening. And I now turn the podium over to Louise Lawrence-Israëls. Louise?
Good evening. I'm happy to be with you here tonight, and thank you so much for inviting me. I was born in 1942 in Haarlem, the Netherlands, when our country was occupied by Nazi Germany already for 2 years. I was given the name Louise Lawrence-Israëls, but I did not know my name till I was almost 3 years old when we were liberated. My parents' most important thought during the years of occupation was to safeguard their children, my brother and me. We had false identity papers, and my name was Maria. Life for Jews and Jewish families became more and more restricted, and when I was 6 months old, we had to go into hiding. Deportations of Jews to the death camps in Poland had begun. My father found a storage attic on top of row houses in the middle of Amsterdam, because just before we went into hiding, the Nazis had ordered my family to move to Amsterdam. The attic had its own sets of stairs and was across the street from the park. There was a small dormer window which did not provide very much natural light. There was a small toilet with a sink with only cold water. There was no kitchen. Only necessities could be taken. Mom took a camping stove and 2 oil lamps, pots and pans, and some utensils. Mattresses for the adults and a crib for me. Also, many warm clothes and bedding were brought in. The 5 of us, Mom, Dad, Mom's friend Selma, my brother and I lived in the attic for 2.5 years. Only my dad left the attic after dark when we needed food or medicines. Sometimes he brought back news, as we did not have a radio or access to newspapers. He was able to make contact with friends who had joined the resistance. He bartered for food. There was no income. My parents never talked about the outside world with us, or about their worries and our relatives. They did not want us to feel that we were missing something. They kept us busy with a form of homeschooling, and we loved it. We thought that our life was normal. Often being hungry and cold was normal. We never talked about religion or celebrated the holidays. That would have been too dangerous. The last winter before we were liberated was called the Hunger Winter. It was unusually cold, and there was even less food. This was true not just for my family, but for all the Dutch people in the northern part of Holland that was still occupied. After we were liberated in May 1945 by the Canadian Army, my parents waited a few days to take us outside. They wanted to be sure that it was safe for us. They tried to explain changes, and I became Louise. My brother and I were so scared, and we could not stop crying. We did not like the outside. It was not the world we knew. The second time outside, we were still crying, and some nice-looking young men in uniform approached us. We had no idea what they were saying to us. We did not speak English, and they were Canadians. They smiled, and they gave us Hershey bars. You never forget the first time you taste chocolate. The next morning when we woke up, my brother screamed that he wanted to go outside again. He wanted more chocolate. My parents never forgot their fears. They brought us up to always be cautious and to look over our shoulders. But they never wanted to talk about the war years and about all our relatives that were murdered. They did not want to burden their children with their grief. I had 3 more siblings after the war. Earning a living and educating their children was most important for my parents. I met Sidney, my American husband, when he was a medical student in Amsterdam. Sidney's mom was born and raised in Toronto. Her parents had fled the pogroms and anti-Semitism in Poland in 1910. They had found domicile in Canada with their little son, as did our crown princess with her family. She had been sent away by her mother, our queen, for safety. Princess Juliana's third daughter, Margriet, was born in Ottawa. The name Margriet means daisy, the flower of our resistance. I went to high school with Margriet in Holland. Sidney and I moved to the US in 1967. And after Sidney retired from the army, we settled in Maryland. January 27th, 75 years ago, the liberation of the notorious death camp Auschwitz occurred. The history of the Holocaust must be taught, and Holocaust memory must be secured. The world must always remember what happens when any society is driven by hate and anti-Semitism. Today, I am one of many Holocaust survivors who volunteer at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. We share our history so that our children's and grandchildren's futures will not be like our past. I will always be grateful for the love my parents gave us, for the heroes of the resistance who risked their lives to help us and protect us, and for the Canadian Army that liberated us, and the soldiers that gave us Hershey bars. Thank you.
Thank you, Louisa, for those moving, poignant, and important comments. It's now my pleasure to invite up to the stage the brains behind this evening's film, Barry Avrich, Canadian film director, producer, author, and much more. Barry, come on up.
Well, thank you, Martin, and thank you, Denise. I'm humbled to be in this home away from home at the embassy, and I also thank Amy and her exceptional team at the Holocaust Memorial Museum. I'm thrilled to present the film tonight. I'll be brief because I want you to see it and so many stories to tell, and it's again, being here in the presence of Louisa and other survivors is what the raison d'etre of this film was. I think we can all agree that the world today is not the world that we were born into. And then you meet Ben Ferencz, this incredible, exceptional man who I did not know. And when I reached out to him, it was staggering to me that a documentary had not been made about him and that the world, with some exceptions, really didn't know who he was. And I found him at the other end of a phone, and I literally said to him, Mr. Ferencz, you don't know me, but I'd like to make a film about your life. And he said, so let's do it. And literally 6 weeks later, we were in front of him making this film. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. So with that, I truly hope you get to know Ben Ferencz. Thank you.